So the reason that I brought you on, man, to do this was because I see you post quotes every once in a while. Little inspirational doodads. And then it isn't just the normal, like, you know what's really profound? The internet. Abraham Lincoln, 1730. Like you're actually, it feels to me like you have something to say when we talk about philosophy and just this idea of this is what's going to get me going for this day or this week. Like, tell me about that. Like, where does that come from?
So yeah, I do like inspirational, like basically daily quotes that, I don't know, like every time it's really funny because like I do it more for me, just because they're just little snippets of different authors or different poets or great minds or whatever. And it started out as basically a way of being like, hey, I haven't read this guy or I haven't read this individual. This is a quote to get me kind of interested in looking into that individual. And it's kind of like every time I go and I'm like, okay, this is getting silly. Cause I feel like I really don't like people normally who like are like just posting like empty kind of things. And so I try really hard to find a quote that, for me, especially like the past couple of years, I've been like, you know what, there's a lot of negativity going around. And so for me, I've always been trying, and I am not a naturally like bubbly personality at all. And so like one of the things that I've
never interacted.
not at all.
No.
One of the big things that I always try to do is I try to counteract that when I'm dealing with people, especially on the internet, because we've talked about this a lot with Focused Fire. There's a lot of venom. There's a lot of vitriol out there about pick your topic.
Sure. A lot of negativity, tons of it. And there's no bottom of it.
Right. And I mean, and the internet offers anonymity when it comes to that. And so there's no playground etiquette, I guess is what we kind of refer to it as. Like you're not gonna get punched in the face if you're a dick to somebody, right? Like because there's no physical interaction, right. And so like a lot of times you get a sense, and this is not by any means a generational thing, because I've seen people who are much older than me be much worse than people who are much younger than me.
Exactly. It knows no boundaries. It knows no pattern beyond the negativity itself.
Right. And I'd almost argue that sometimes the older generations actually have a harder time adopting to that depersonalization on both sides, both in giving and receiving criticism on the internet, because they're so used to, up until recently, there has only been that face to face. And so now they have like this anonymous thing. But anyway, so like what I try to do is I try to either post a quote that to me is like, something that's like, hey, don't be a dick. Like, just like to me, that's just kind of my mantra really. Or it's like, hey, you know what? You're having a hard time. A lot of the poems that I'm a big fan of, like for today, I think was I don't think it was Wadsworth. I just blanked on the guy I posted today, but it's one of my favorite like quotes is I'm a master of my own fate. And it's basically, like no matter what happens, no matter what punishments are delivered, that doesn't mean that it's okay to treat someone like that. Another one that I had a few days ago that I'm a huge fan of is, when you're the anvil bear, when your hammer strike. And it's just one of those things where it's like, look, just because life gives you a shit hand or life, if life gives you a shit hand, I mean, I'm sitting here in the middle of, a room full of tech that I'm fully aware most of the known world does not have access to because I live in America. First world problems abound in our society. And so like my problems are nothing. I have a roof over my head. I have, I don't have a lot of the issues that I know exist out there.
Right.
And so it's like, look, even though it's bad for me, like my moment of boo-hoo is I didn't get an hour of sleep last night. There are people out there whose hour of boo-hoo is, I don't know if I'm going to freaking be alive.
Exactly.
And so, and I just like, to me, it's more about, making sure that you realize not just like how good you have it, but also just like there are other sides of existence out there. And that's also kind of, to kind of bring it back to the focus fire idea. That's really where a lot of the idea came from was, and I know we'll get into this a little bit with the philosophy, but like the thing is like everyone comes at a situation from a different point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And that by no means invalidates any particular point of view. Actually, what it does is it means that the more points of views that you can assimilate, the better the picture that you get. And you see that a lot with different analytical philosophies, a lot of different analytics in scholastic studies and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you get a really good group and when you get a really healthy analysis together, what you see is it's basically a think tank. It's a Socratic method of analysis, and I find
that's just something that is really lacking overall in the public discussion proper, where more often than not, unfortunately, regardless of your background, regardless of your perspective, regardless of your point of view, most of the time, unfortunately, discussions tend, especially in passionate groups of people, tend to degenerate into the I'm right, you're wrong philosophy. And rather
well,
than
and again, the internet definitely doesn't help because like, if we were sitting over, let's just say we're sitting in a bar, right? And we're discussing this conversation over a table. There are just certain things you don't say. Like it doesn't matter how much you disagree with someone. There are just things that you do not say to another person when you're face to face because
like go kill yourself or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Don't get me started. Sorry. And my thing there is like, and that, I mean, the reason why that's kind of a trigger for me right now is because that's in the gaming community. That seems to be the thing. It's like, why these, anyways, developers are human beings. Mm-hmm. And, regardless of if you agree or disagree with them, that's fine. That's cool. You have your opinion. That's awesome. And actually, I want you to have your opinion. I don't want to be in the middle of a group of sheep that are like, I don't know. I don't know a game that I'm going to get not knocked for saying that. But I mean, like that, Call of Duty is great or Destiny 2 is great. If there are people who are going to find pieces of those games that they don't agree with. And you know what? If you didn't, I'd actually be more concerned because by not having different pieces that resonate with you, that's where the individuality comes from. That's where the different interpretations of stuff comes from. And that's where those differences, that's where it really starts shining as far as the discussion. If you don't have those differences, you don't have a conversation. And that's where we kind of focus on with, Focus Fire. And, we have a lot of that with Beard and I, when we get on tangents that we disagree with, and I had this conversation last night because we were talking about an argument that we still have. Right. And it's like, at the end of the day, I'm going to have my opinion. That's the point is I have my opinion. The important thing for having a conversation with someone who also has an opinion is that we both realize when we were having this conversation, those are opinions. Those are not facts.
Exactly. And that's what's lost.
And that's where and that's where I don't know. And I don't really know.
Well, the nuance of just being able to say, I understand your point of view. I appreciate your point of view as being valid. However, I completely disagree with it. Here's how I view it. And we should share an idea of visualization that somewhere in between what we each think is probably where the truth actually lies. But right now, I'm here, you're there, but you know what? That's okay. And that mutual understanding and willingness to accept the other person as equally valid, that's what you lose most of the time in these discussions, and that's the shame of it. That's what I would hope.
And that's what's so funny is like, so we had the podcast. So we had the podcast last night that we had the disagreement on, and then actually about probably a month or a month and a half ago, we had the podcast where both Beard and I were basically, both of us gotten very fed up with it's just the negativity. It's draining. It's really, honestly, it's just draining. I have my own complaints. You can ask anyone from Focus Fire. I do not think that anything that Bungie puts out is perfect. But at the same time, I'm put in a weird position because I don't want to criticize, a developer, regardless. I mean, Bungie,
for its own sake. I mean, why would you do that?
343. I feel like, and this is kind of a weird thing. And this is where I feel like I'm kind of an odd duck out of, or an odd, black sheep here, is like, as a person who some people look up to. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple people out there who listen to me and be like, oh yeah, I look up to this guy. I don't know why you do that, but I recognize there might be a couple of you. But I mean, as that, I feel that my responsibility is that if I criticize someone, I have to be very careful. Because if I criticize them for no other reason than I don't like your face, that puts the onus on any vitriol that response creates. That's on me.
That's right. A lot of people don't get that.
But at the same right. But I mean, at the same time, if I criticize you because I'm like, and this is where Beard and I got into an argument. And it's like, if I criticize you because I feel that, like, the whole thing with Eververse, right? If I feel that there's a moral issue there and I have a problem with that moral issue, at the same time, it's almost a imperative for me to bring it up. Because on the flip side, if I don't bring it up, then that is also on me. So there is the thing. But then you get into a situation where, like, Beard had a really big problem with that. I don't give a shit. Like, I don't. Like, I don't have, like, I recognize what Beard's problem is, but I just don't agree with it. I don't have a moral problem. I think that Destiny 2's microtransaction, as quote whatever, everyone's freaking out about. I mean, it's one of the best microtransaction systems out there. As far as, like, the options, like, realistically, you are going to have microtransactions. If you think that you're going to have a video game that doesn't have microtransactions, that is a multiplayer game,
is a living, breathing game over, years.
Go look at money flow, and you're gonna be. I mean, you're just gonna be disappointed.
Right.
I really.
We don't necessarily need to go down that path. But.
Right. There are games out there that have different systems, like Warframe. Warframe's the one that a lot of people bring up. But Warframe is also, they have behind the scenes a completely different structure, right? There's a completely different context there. And then you have COD, which is also the opposite. Like, there's two polar opposites, right? And so, like, and then you start looking at, like, the actual, my response is like, well, where's the money coming from? Right, it's like the money.
Well,
is
how
not
do you
coming
expect them to keep the game running you love so much if you're doing this?
Yeah, it's like, and part of that is that I do have, like, my quote unquote real job is basically programming. Like, I basically run interference between vendors and business users, and then our IT support. So I have to keep, like, 3 different groups of people who are actively trying to kill each other happy with each other. Like, it's weird, like, because, like, as like it's basically, I'm a translator chip between all 3 of these people, or 3 groups. Like, the business unit wants, the pie in the sky, castle in the sky, this just pipe dream, right? Which is fine. That's what we're chasing. The IT people and the security people, especially in the financial world, which is what I work in, it's security people who are understandably paranoid and conservative about everything. They are like, okay, we recognize that you want this, but that's going to open us up to, A, B, and C and Z risk, and we're just not going to do it. And it's like, well, you got to, because that's how we get business. Like, we have to produce business to pay you to do your job. So,
Right.
you know, and then we have vendors who are like, oh, well, that person who gives us money wants us to do this. So we're going to go and do it, but we're not going to tell anybody until we come back. And then we're going to be mad at you because we find out that your IT people won't. It's like, it's hurting cats.
And it boils down to like, these are all valid.
And they're all valid.
Concerns.
They're
right.
all valid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they all come from very different points of view and different goals. And, and I think that, you know, your job should be to kind of level and say, hey, let me play a translator for you. Here's what all these things are trying to accomplish. Here's what it means to us. Here's how we balance that. And move forward.
Here's the compromise between all three of these things, and it's
there's
it's
no
funny
one
because,
doing
like,
that on the internet or in day-to-day life. Like, it doesn't happen.
And that's
what
I was just about to say. It's like, and that's why it's so funny to me, because that's what I feel like. I'm like, okay, I'm off work. I'm gonna go play video games, and let's compromise between these two like extremes. Because I mean, I get it. I mean, the consumer, us consumers. If you have a problem with it, you know, the biggest thing, and we've said this a lot, the biggest thing to do is speak with your wallet, right? You know, and a lot of people are like, well, you know, I only $60 isn't going to be. I'm like, but again, guys, you know, the thing is that the reason microtransactions are so freaking popular is because they make a shit ton of money. Off of microtransactions. Now, granted, in the big scheme of things, that's also where you get the point that your games haven't increased in price for a number of years.
I've said I think this till I'm blue in the fucking face. It's not even been adjusted for inflation.
Right. And that's the thing is like and Pins and I have had this conversation a lot too. The last time a game went up was like when the Xbox 360 dropped, right? It went up by $10 and people lost their effing minds.
Shit. Yeah, because it used to be $50.
It used to be like $50 and now games are like 60.
But people don't remember the time when Atari games were $70. They don't remember that shit.
Well, I mean, true. Yeah. But I mean,
you know, that's the point is that when you have a market that largely has not changed structure, how do you, the demands of marketing, the demands of programming, the demands of keeping games on as a service, the costs go up, the revenue that's expected to come in, even if you factor in there's a higher number of sales coming in, the ratio does not stay constant. How do you maintain this? You either raise the price or you find another revenue stream.
And they did. And the thing is like, and that's where my personal argument is like, you know, like as long as the game doesn't have a pay to win situation, I'm like, cool, I'm good.
Right, because you can choose to invest in it.
I don't have to participate. Yeah, I'm like, the only money that I've spent on silver. Now, hang on, let me make sure I'm not going to lie. No, I spent my own money on silver once. Other than that, the only money that I've ever spent on silver is like I'll do things on the Xbox. Like I play on the Xbox. Xbox Live every now and then does like these like they're not really tournaments, but they're like, you know, hey, play this game for like in Game Pass. They'll do it. They're like, you know, if you're part of the Game Pass program, you get access to, you know, whatever the library of the game is. And they'll put up like this month is like you solve this riddle and you find out what game they're talking about. You play it for 5 hours. And you get entered into a giveaway for an Xbox One X.
Right on.
In December, they were like, hey, if you they did a really cool thing. Like you basically, if you joined Xbox Game Pass, you paid $1 and then Microsoft went out and donated $10 to a charity. So that's like, all right, fine, whatever. I'm jumping in on that. It's $1 off my back and it gives $10 to charity. Done. I don't care. But then, like, you know, like I think it was yesterday, I get a message from Xbox. They're like, "Hey, you completed this challenge that I didn't know about, but you completed this challenge. Here's $5."
Nice.
I'm like, I can't do anything with $5. I mean, like, just to be blunt, there's no games out there that I'm interested in that are going to cost me $5,
right?
And I'm not gonna. I don't really feel the inclination to go out and spend $50 because I save $5. So I just turned around and I was like, all right, fine. Buy silver, you know, whatever. It's $5 free. I got the 400 silver and it cost me 50 cents. I'm like, and you know, the thing is at the end of the day, it helps out. Like it helps out. But I mean, that's the thing is like, I've talked to a lot of people who are like, oh, but I gotta get, you know, it feeds into the mentality of, the rat hitting the bar, right?
Yep.
You know, I need the next pellet. I need the next pellet. And I'm like, guys,
I need this armor set. I need this shit. I need this. I need that.
Yeah, I'm like, and I give my brother shit about this all the time because he's totally like this. It's like, I need to get that new armor before they go out. And I'm like, why? It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't do anything.
But
it
for,
really
at the end of the day,
but,
like,
I mean,
what's important is that does it have value for that person? And if that person has value, then that's on them. And the person that doesn't, like, they can't leave that alone. But I feel like, unfortunately, Eververse is no longer the biggest game in town. And ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. We have completely derailed. I think we've kind of
welcome to my conversation versions.
It totally happens, man. It's fine. But the thing is, we can kind of interweave this because this all comes down to different viewpoints in life, which is all philosophy really is. It's a different viewpoint. So, like, right now...
I was getting there.
I get it. But it's my show. I can't have you talking for a fucking hour without me getting interjecting, bro. I ain't doing that. So I'm going to try and bring it around, take you to Mordor, bring you back to the Shire. Or if you're playing Division, Darkness Zone, come back to the... Anyway, so... The Darkness Zone, which I hate, by the way. I'm not going to talk about that. But the most recent, thing that came about, and I was going to save this till after the show, but you know what? Might as well. We're on a roll. The biggest thing I see right now, which just makes me go, what do you want? The community lists all their complaints out for 3 fucking months. Bungie goes on vacation for Christmas, comes back, says, here's all the shit we're fixing. We're fixing every major complaint you had. You got a timeline when it's going to get fixed. Plus, we're giving you more shit you didn't even ask for that solves problems you've been telling us about in new and creative ways. Well, I'll believe it when I see it. Or it doesn't mean anything unless blank. It's like, fuck you. Fuck your whole family in the mouth. Like, just grow up. Go play something else. Drink some Drano. I don't give a fuck, but get out of my face with that bullshit. And to go back to your earlier point, there are people that are thing. There are people that are big players in the Destiny community that are literally talking shit about the game, if you can read between the lines. And it's like, fuck you. Like, if your show, if your product is that pigeonholed, you made that happen, not Bungie, not the community, and certainly it's no one else's fault but you. If you're frustrated and you don't know what to do with your business, talk about that. Don't waste your energy on, well, I guess I gotta go back to Fortnite now. Fucking eat a dick. I'm sorry. Like, that's all I got.
Well, and that's the funny thing with, like, so, like, talking about, like, the pigeonhole thing, that was legitimately a big conversation that we had with Focus Fire, right? From the very beginning. Because the thing is like, at the end of the day, here's a spoiler. We do it because we enjoy it. You're not gonna hear me talking too much crap about Destiny 2 because, to be honest, I enjoy the hell out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. That surprise. I don't know anyone who's had a conversation with me that probably hasn't realized that, but I don't have that big of a problem with it. And the thing is like, with all these people who are like, oh, the meta is all messed up. I'm like, guys, you are talking to a person who literally has not changed the weapon loadout that I use since I got the weapon.
Right.
Like, I found the weapon that I like, and that's the weapon I use. I don't give a shit if it's effective or not. It's the weapon that I like using. I did the same thing in Destiny 1, which is why I didn't play Destiny 1 PvP, because I was a scout rifle user, and that was not a fun experience. Like, I just, whatever. But at the same time, you also never heard me, like, bitching and whining about it.
Right.
You just didn't see me in there. I'm like, all right, fine, whatever, cool. I'll go play SWAT on Halo 5 because I love the shit out of that, or Super Fiesta, and just have fun. That's ultimately the end of it right there. That's the end message. Is it's a video game,
right?
And yes, and so before I go any further, I understand that for some people that is their business, and like streamers have. It's a tough gig. It's a tough gig. I get that. I 100% get. But at the same time, I think you hit it on the head there, because it's like, if you have backed yourself into a corner, I mean, let's look at the statement. You backed yourself. That's not a developer's fault. The developer's job The developer's job is to produce a title that then sells.
Yeah.
And guess what, guys? Destiny's doing it, or Bungie's doing a pretty
on top of that too. Think about like the overarching like
job with that.
The mainstream complaint from Destiny 1, the one you hear more than anything else, was there was too much grind for the people who didn't have a lot of time. Well, and so now you get the game that doesn't demand much of your time, and you're like, now you're complaining about that. Like, what?
I love that. I'm like, okay, but and that's why I think it was oh shit, who was it? It was Ishtar Commander posted Henry Ford quote. It's like, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for a better horse. Like, but no, he went out and he invented the damn car.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, like that's the thing is like there is a point at which from a development standpoint, you have to be like, okay, I understand that this is what you're asking for, but that's not necessarily what you need.
Yeah, Bungie's MO has always been to solve problems in ways we didn't know.
Oh yeah,
they were solving problems we didn't know we even fucking had.
Right, and I mean, granted, that, to my opinion, that's the point of a good developer, is that they're not going to tell you necessarily the problems, because part of the fact is that part of the solution to the problem is making sure that people aren't aware of the problem. Like, you know, that's if you do your job right as a programmer or as a developer, people won't know what you're doing.
Right.
That's just an axiom for anyone who's not a programmer or developer. Get used to that, because a lot of those people in the real world and in the industries in general, not just gaming. Actually, it's far worse in other genres of jobs. Like, a lot of our security specialists, if I wasn't in the position that I am in, you know, it's like, if I didn't have to interface with them on a daily basis, I would never have met these people. Mm-hmm. Because they do not make a point of telling, hey, there's an issue with our security firewall. If you do this and this, it's going to violate protocol and let people hack us.
Right.
Because by saying that, then you're going to have people out there who are like, oh, well, if you poke this, I'm going to, you know, and it's like, it's a catch-22, because you can't tell people necessarily what you're doing, but you have to let them know that you're working on something. Right. So there is a degree of trust there. And I think that goes back into what we were kind of talking at the beginning, is like the thing with the internet and the thing with not having that face-to-face relationship with people, which I mean, even though I am definitely a fan of digital communication, you know, I definitely prefer that over face-to-face. I understand that, though, face-to-face meetings with people are very important, because it builds that human connection. Without that human connection, you can't trust people. And I think that's a lot of times where, you know, Pins is talking about that in the chat right now. It's not just Bungie, right? It's not just 343. It's not just fill in blank developer. People don't have the human connection there to kind of rely on, right, with regards to trusting. And
exactly. And they don't, for whatever reason, they don't have the emotional maturity or wherewithal or what have you to, right, to allow that gap, because there's a dehumanization that happens, and
there's also a generational thing too, because to be honest, you know, like, especially the millennial generation especially has been kind of brought up with a taught, I don't want to say paranoia, but a taught distrust to anything that is kind of profit oriented.
Sure.
And you see this a lot. Like, there's a really common theory within sociology that there's roughly 4 generations that just repeat themselves.
Yep.
And so, like, right now, the millennials, like, I'm a millennial, and then, like, my son will be I think, I don't know what they're technically calling them now. They're technically like Gen Z, but like, basic. I can't remember. I don't remember. Like,
is there?
I don't know. It was alphabetical, and then it wasn't, and then it kind of tried to go back to it. So, and I'm like, Gen Y made sense, because the idea was, like, they always asked the question why.
Right.
And then I was like, okay. And then they were like, oh, Gen Z. And I'm like, oh, okay. And
then
I can't remember what it is.
But like, is there like somebody at the National Institute for Anthropology that like sits around and they have coffee and they're like,
no,
right.
Because like the generation before us was what was it? The baby boomers. Like it's like, okay, that kind of makes sense too. But then where did X come from?
Extreme, you know, you know.
Attitude though in those different generations, like you have the silent generation, right, which is, you know, World War II, Great Depression, the people who were just they buckled down and they had to deal with a lot of shit, like I mean just a lot of shit, and they survived that. And then you had like the baby boomers who, you know, and so like the silent generation are the people who are very institutionalized as far as like the thought process. You stick with you work hard, you don't raise a fuss, and you just do your job and you go home and you take care of your family. That's where the traditional family concept comes from. And then, well, not comes from, but they really embrace that. And then you had the baby boomers who are, you know, kind of the same, you know, they're very focused on, this is my job. I take my pride out of my job, you know, so you have like lifers. That's where you get the lifers concept. And then you had kind of, I know Gen Xers hate me saying this, but the kind of the millennial generation.
Right.
And this is where you actually kind of get like the start of a pendulum swing as far as like attitudes towards professions, because you start seeing a lot of the entrepreneurial spirit raise its head, because also understand socially that at that point in history, America especially, and that's, you know, I live in America, so that's where I'm going to kind of base most of my stuff off of.
America.
But generationally, America, socially, we were entering into basically, I hate saying a golden age, but it was kind of like a very comfortable point.
Sure.
We didn't have, you know, these threats,
or so we thought,
outside. Right. Well, I mean, economically, we kind of were. I mean, economically,
right.
we were in a really good position. And then we hit all the shit of the 2000s, right?
Yeah.
In the 90s, and like in the bubbles that kind of got built into that generation. And that's the generation that, you know, we were growing up in. So we were, and then, you know, 9/11 happened.
But I would argue, though,
our generation has been shaped that way.
Absolutely. But I would also argue that between the realism of things since 9/11 combined with the information age, I'd argue that the cycle of generations has been broken, and now you have all these different generational mechanics that are now mixed within the populace at large.
Right. Well, like, and the thing,
and maybe it's a nature versus nurture argument, you know, and that's you know, certainly not something I certainly want to spend a lot of time on. But I will say without a doubt that you're seeing people of varying ages latching onto philosophies and life ideals that, generationally speaking, they should not have. I will use an example. I'll give you an example. I'm 40 years old. And one of my longtime viewers, this is a couple years ago, this is before the elections took place, long before they took place. This young man, 17 years old, if he's a day at the time, still in high school, but he's decided he's going to the military, and I'm a Marine Corps veteran myself. Decides he's going to the military and just kind of proclaimed one day, I'm voting for president, I'm voting for Trump. And I'm like, why? And I at the time he didn't have a running platform. Like he hadn't done all the shit that he's doing yet. And he did the whole like, well, he speaks from the hip. He's a real American. I'm like, no, he doesn't, and no, he's not. And I was like, goodbye. And I said, and goodbye. And I didn't mean to shit on the kid. I really didn't. But at the same time, like, he didn't have a compelling argument. He couldn't give me an actual answer. But he kind of like, he's 17 years old in the year 2015, 2016. And this kid, and by now he's a man, is spouting things that I would have expected to hear out of somebody 3 times his age, or by somebody his age in like 1984. In such a way, very Reagan era, like, I'm going to eat the fucking chocolate pudding and drink the Kool-Aid shit. Marble Man's got my vote, bitch. You know, like, whatever. And it blew my mind because it was something that I just never expected to hear. So that was when I started to realize that, okay, this what I thought, because I was a lot with what the point you were making, where it's like you see things kind of change and these waves come, like the ocean. They're just 20-year waves. It's not like that anymore, because people have just started to like melt together. Like the melting pot of America has become literal in terms of sociological concepts and these ideas. It's less about here's how we as a generation were brought up, because we don't all watch the Cosby Show at 8:00 on Wednesdays anymore, especially now because motherfucking rape people. But that's not the point. The point being that we
because we also a lot of people have cut the cords, and with the
people just do not. People have discovered the freedom of thought that we're in right now, which is a beautiful thing. However, that gives rise to disparate extremities among society at large, both Western, Eastern, and everything in between. So to me, that's why I find it so fascinating that sometimes we do come back to more the classics, as it were, whether it's a Bruce Lee or just a quote from Shakespeare or Alfred Hitchcock or whatever. Bill Hicks is one of my favorites. Someone who, although he was a comic, was a really good social observer.
Sometimes I would argue comics are the most truthful.
They have no choice, because it's something you have to express.
But I mean, like, if you historically too, the jesters in courts, they were kind of to a degree protected, and they kind of were the people who were expected to a degree to kind of poke fun at decisions that were made, and sometimes the stick that they poked with wasn't dull. Right. And some of the most successful people in the world, or in the history of political commentary, they're comics. I mean, you have what is it? Well,
their job is to observe and report in a way that, Jon Stewart, like their entire life revolves around this idea of I observe, I report. And I really think it's why The Daily Show was big. It's why I think Colbert was such a great commentary, and still remains to be. Whether you agree with them or not, they're doing...
That's besides the point. But my point is that they have a degree of expectation that... like, a lot of people dismiss them. I mean, I say a lot of people. People dismiss them because they're like, oh, he's a comedian, he doesn't really... But I mean, like, if you actually sit down and you start looking at... I mean, this is like... I'm sure you remember Mad Comics.
Yes.
I mean, Jesus Christ! You sit down and you start reading some of those comics, and then you look at the history. Yeah, you start looking at the historical events that was happening during the publications of those comics. You're like, oh, no, they were deliberately, like, not necessarily undermining, but like they were tearing apart the arguments of serious conversations. But they were delivering it in a very, very comical,
palatable way. And what was awesome about that, it was that because, by and large, you had just a few different kinds of people that read those in their heyday, like the 70s, 80s, and very early 90s. And it was young children who didn't yet, like, they didn't really know yet, and then high school kids who finally read the old issues and got it, and then they read it into college.
Right, but I mean, but my point is too that the message. So that gets into the conversation of, like, just because you don't understand the content of the message doesn't mean the message isn't being delivered.
Exactly, and I think that as two people who spend a lot of time, unfortunately, on Twitter, you see that all the time, and then in Reddit too, like. I've kind of been choosing my battles over the last couple weeks since the Christmas thing hit. But the main battles I go into guns blazing are the ones where someone will say, well, we think. I'm like, motherfucker, say I. Stop speaking for everybody. Because you know what? Like, if I go on, for example, the original Destiny Reddit, it's like this long list. I'm like, do you motherfuckers just not realize that you don't represent the majority? You're just pushing out all the people who might disagree with you, and now you've got this big pool of, this is all our shit, look at our shit, I'm gonna rub it on my nipples and this shit, and I posted something about that when I was really angry one day, and it got a lot of hatred, and that's okay. I felt awesome. I mean, hell, then you've got another, the thing is, there's a counterbalance to that. There's another Reddit called Low Sodium Destiny. Now, I went over there, and I made a post that said, dude, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you guys are having great discussions, this and that, da-da-da-da. It got upvoted to the front page almost immediately. And people were having great discussions. We were having a great time. And then a mod comes in and says, deleted because you broke the rules, because you're not supposed to have any positive thank you for this place existing posts. But the thing said, deleted because it was against the rules. Please read them. Okay, thanks. Bye. It was the rudest fucking moderation thing. It was so... And then I looked at the guy's account and I went, this guy's an asshole. Why is he moderating at all? so that's where I put this
That's
poll.
why he's moderating.
Right. So I put this poll up on Twitter that said, hey, if you're a moderator on Reddit, is there an expectation of professionalism? And the last time I checked, there were only 15 votes, but it was 100% yes. I expect them to be professional and shit.
Like,
right. You're there to keep the peace. It's right. You would hope that would be something that you get. Again,
who moderates the moderators?
Right. So, Watchmen, you have to just watch me, guys. It's Watchmen. But like for me, that comes down to like, think about how disparate those two things are. You go to the original, which was the beacon of, in my opinion, balanced thought and balanced, commentary on the game until about 3 months ago. And then I went to a place that purported to be the balanced place. So the moderators of the really shitty place are great. The moderators at the not so shitty place are fucking awful. Like, what is that about? And if you're, by the way, if you're a moderator of either one of these Reddits, I'm not speaking about you personally, okay, at all.
The best thing about them was Woodhouse. Did you see the tweet from Woodhouse where he was like, "By the way, we're just announcing in general before the whatever this week at Bungie, we're locking it down." They started calling it the Ghost Protocol.
Yeah. And like, well, Fuzzle's one of the mods over there.
Yeah, Fuzzle was one of the, yeah.
He started following me and started liking some of the stuff. So I'm like, I know I'm not alone here. And I have this in my mind because I see his avatar, so I imagine him talking. So I can see him going like, please take me with you. Please, Jim, save us. It's in my head. Because I like these poor mods over at DTG. I'm just like, oh my God, it must be so horrible for you.
Oh God. Oh. And the thing is about that is like, I feel for them so much because the shit that we see on DTG, I'm like, that's after they've gone through.
Right.
Cleaned it up.
Right.
Like, what is actually being sent that they have to be like,
know.
I have to read this because, because I mean, again, going back to the professional, and I think that, a lot of the mods over at DTG are fucking phenomenal. Like I respect the shit out of the job that they do.
Yeah.
But oh my God, like I'm sitting there, I'm like, what is it to be a day in their life? It's like, I'm
just
like,
set your hair on fire.
I'm not an asshole, but Jesus Christ, stop posting stuff. Like, stop.
Right. Like, it's like, and it's this thing, like the frustrating part for anybody, whether your points are valid or not, like if you keep, like you've driven the point home, you shot the arrow dead center and you made a great point. Right. But if you make that point every hour of every day over and over and over again, you're not being more valid. You're not being more effective. You're just being a cocksucker. And not the good kind. Cocksuckers are some of my favorite people.
And then there's and I think that kind of goes back into the generational thing between, the generations and with the internet, because I don't think a lot of people, and I mean this as gently as I can possibly mean this.
Don't be gentle. This is my podcast. Like, fuck.
I think a lot of people don't understand basic debate.
Yeah.
Like actual debate. Like, there is going to be, and we kind of started talking about this at the start, there is a degree at which, I go into a conversation, like just me personally, I go into a conversation expecting to be the only person to have my point of view. And so I'm often pleasantly surprised because usually I'm like, I'm not the only person, but there are times when I'm like, okay, yep, I was right. I'm the only person with this point of view. But going into it, it's like, I understand that, again, going back to the idea that this is my opinion, you have your opinion. And as long as we're not like trying to crucify each other, which if that's what happens, then I just basically am like, okay, I'm disengaging. Like, if you are that blind, like if you have that strong of blinders on, then really there's no point to having a conversation.
There's nothing
I'm
to
not going to
engage with
sit
at
here.
that point.
Well, but I mean, like, I'm not going to sit here and preach at you, and I don't want you sitting there and preaching at me, because it's not an all or nothing. Like, conversations have always been a way to bring people together. And that's the point of them, is because if you don't do that, then we're no better than anything else that's territorial. The entire point of intelligent conversation is to take two extremes and find a middle ground. Now, notice I never said that I have to agree with that middle ground, or I don't have to agree with that other extreme.
There's such a thing as hostile,
I have to
like hostile compromise. Like it can exist.
Right. But the thing is I have, and this is where I kind of think that a lot of people have lost this art of debate, is because just because I don't agree with your statement, like with beer, right?
Sure.
I don't agree with the moral issue on microtransactions.
Right.
I understand it, and I can see it. I can sympathize with it, or I can empathize with it. I don't sympathize with it. I can empathize. I can put myself in his shoes, and I can see the problem that he has. I don't agree with it,
right?
But I don't have to agree with it. That's the thing. Is like, I think that's what a lot of people forget, is that just because you're able to stand in someone else's shoes, that does not mean that you lose the ground that you're arguing from. Right. What actually means is that it gives you a better argument.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, the point of debate and conversation is not to make everyone into you. It's to get your point across.
Right. Oh, yeah.
To make sure to ensure understanding. And once everyone understands everyone's points, then you can come to the table with a compromise.
Yes.
People forget about that.
Yes. And that's the thing, is that's like, kind of going back to the core of the focused fire chat theory, is that the reason we started this as a cross community is because we wanted to give people a safe haven, because at the time that we started this a couple of years ago, it was in the middle of the whole, like, Bungie or Destiny doesn't have any story, and anyone who says different, and it was the same old, right? If you disagreed with this perceived common view, if you disagreed with it, you weren't like necessarily attacked, but you kind of felt like you were. And so what we basically were like, all right, fine, we're going to open up a discourse, and this place is safe. I don't care if you don't agree. If you don't agree that Bungie has a story with it, then first off, why are you here? Because we're talking about the story. So I mean, we eliminated that poison, like, right out the gate. Like, we're just like, if you're going to attack people for analyzing the story of a game that you claim doesn't have a story, I mean, why are you here? And I've had that conversation with people.
It's like, you pick up a sandwich that clearly has bacon on it. You're like, that doesn't have bacon on it. Like, I'll show it here. Take it. It's like, right here. It's right. Take it.
I'm like, what are you even doing here, dude? Like, I mean. Like, and I mean, there was a lot of vitriol thrown at me at the start, because they're like, well, you're just wasting your time. I'm like, okay, cool. It's my time.
It's my time to waste. Exactly.
It's like, it has nothing to do with you. Why and that was a question, why does the way I spend my free time, which is not harming you, why are you so incensed by that?
Right.
Why are you so upset? And I have actually gained a couple people who, are now pretty good friends, who originally were not sympathetic to that. And it's like, because I kind of responded with, instead of like, punch you in the face because you tried to sucker punch me, I'm like, I just was like, why do you care? It's my free time. I'm not forcing you. I'm not like saying, hey, pay $10 to get into the chat. I'm literally saying, here's an area that you are free to, so you say there's no story. Cool. Okay. Let me show you that there is. And I'm not going to patronize you. I'm not going to talk down to you. I'm going to say, here is where there is a story. Here is where we can do this, and we can make a story. If they don't have a story, cool. Then guess what?
The elements are here, right?
Yeah, the elements are here. I mean, the points are all here. And the thing is like, that's where I think a lot of the positivity kind of started with us. Was we kind of were like, from the very beginning, we were like, look, you know, the entire point is we want to be an area where people can come and they're like, okay, this game feels like it should have a story, but it also feels like there isn't one. What am I missing? And it's like, okay, cool. Come with us this way. Let's, you know, let us show you what we have found. And some of the best conversations in Focus Fire have been from people who literally walk in and are like, I don't understand why this is happening. And I'm like, well, I don't either. Let's look at it. You know, like, because like there's one of the best questions way early on was like, why I can't remember exactly, but it was basically along the lines of like, why are the Fallen doing this? And it was like, when you do what at the time, you know, well, it's still, you know, when you get so involved in like the fine details of a story, you miss the forest for the leaves.
Yeah.
Right. You're so focused on the individual minutia of the information that sometimes you forget that there's a tree there. And so
exactly,
sometimes having someone who comes in and like, hey,
ask you a broader question.
I don't understand why that tree looks that way. Why is that? And you have to kind of step back and you're like, oh shit, that's a tree. Okay. All right. Let's look at this again. That actually answers more questions than originally, you know, and we've had people who do that. Like, I feel like I'm asking stupid questions. Like, as an inquisitive idiot, there are no stupid questions. Like, right. I ask really stupid questions all the time. That's kind of part of existing. And the thing is that, yeah, sure, you can argue back and forth that there are no stupid questions, but at the end of the day, that's the point. Is if you ever stop asking questions, that's the point where you need to be worried. You know, never stop asking, never stop challenging. And I think,
but that's the problem though, is that we have a community of people on the internet, gaming community in particular, that aren't asking questions. They're making statements, and they're folding their arms and they're going, like that's their entire conversation. Like they don't want to learn. They don't want to ask questions. They don't want to understand. They want. It's like that comic that's gone around for what I think 2 years now. It's one of my favorites, where it says, "I'm mad about this. Here's a solution. I don't want a solution. I want to be mad.
I want to be mad."
Right, and it's so prevalent. So prevalent. I mean, I'm guilty of it sometimes, you know. And
well, everyone is. It's the feeling of being righteously angry. You know, like that feeling is good. It's not productive.
No.
It's not productive at all.
Because you feel self-righteous. You feel like you stand for something. Right. You feel like alive.
You feel like that you have a drive to prove something, and that's fine. That's great. But proving something, and this is again kind of one of my axioms.
See, you know, that goes back to Jurassic Park.
One of my axioms. Yeah. Oh God. I've been like quoting.
We've got meta. We've got meta here. We got meta here. See, nobody cares. Like it doesn't.
No one cares. Hold on your butts.
Right.
No, like one of the things for me is like, you know, in a conversation with someone that I disagree with, I'd rather build a bridge than tear down their world.
Absolutely.
It's super easy. It's super easy to destroy things. It's one of the easiest things in the world, and that is particular. And it's especially true psychologically. In today's world, you know, we have whatever you want to think about. People are generally more in touch with their emotions, sometimes too much so, but that's neither here or there. The thing is, at the end of the day, people are aware of their emotional standpoint, and you know, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. I would rather take hyperactive psychological awareness than deadened psychological awareness.
I'll take passion over, you know, objectivity for its own sake any day of the week, because you can bring objectivity to someone who's passionate, but you cannot create passion out of nothing. And I feel like, you know, again, when we look at, you know, basic social skills and the things that as a society if you look at any internet outlet, we are losing as society in any idea of being able to rationally step back after you've emotionally expressed and accept and empathize with someone else. And I think that, if just these little tiny things, whether it's the quote you put every day or just this desire, like this demonstrable desire to communicate, I think on a long enough timeline, you will find something. Sometimes you'll shut down somebody just by being reasonable. You just be reasonable, and then they just what?
That's the best.
I expected you to tell me to cut my dick off.
To trolls are like, it's like, okay, I hear you. This is actually why I did this, and I'm sorry that it offended you. Yeah, and I've had people be like, right, but. And I'm like, I'm not gonna attack you guys. Like,
right.
That's the thing is like, and that's why for me, I joke with Beard about this a lot with like comments on, not just YouTube, but like the podcast and iTunes. We get reviews on iTunes that are just like, I'm like, I don't know where I insulted your family, but I am sorry. Like, it's like I apparently really dishonored your grandmother, or so. I have no idea why I pissed you off this much, but at the end of the day, it's like, look, guys, I read all this stuff and I try to figure out like a lot. Like I view myself in people's shoes. So like I view the world the way I view it, and that's the only way I can. And so when someone not insults, but someone like attacks us as a group, it's like, okay, why? Like, why would I say that to someone?
Like, what would drive me to that point? Yeah.
Well, yeah. What would drive me to that point? Like, I'm like, I don't think I could ever get that pissed off,
right,
to say that.
Yeah. Like,
actually say that. And I think that's where, for me, that's a struggle that I have. But like, the other thing is like, just realizing that there are human beings at the other end. That's the big thing for me.
And people forget that. Like, they forget every time.
Right. And it's so easy. I mean, like, I'm sitting in a room right now and I have screens all in front of me. Like there is no other human being here for me.
Right.
For my experience of my reality right now, I am the only person. It's a very egotistical, or it's a very egocentrical worldview. And as we progress more and more into this technology realms, that's going to become more and more the norm. You see that a lot in cultures that are obsessed with the video game stuff. I mean, China is one of them. They
Yep.
And that's why, and Beard and I have had this conversation, but that's why, like, in China, they have completely different laws. I mean, it's one of the reasons, but they have completely different laws about loot boxes, right? Like they
because culturally they have bigger problems to deal with.
This is the argument that Beard and I have had recently, so that's why it keeps coming back to loot boxes.
Well, it's just
there's a completely different expectation that there is legitimately going to be an issue, and so the culture has kind of tried to preemptively prevent that.
I would also argue, though, and this is maybe a point you've made if I had to venture a guess, that maybe there's an underlying cultural reason that those things are more easily bred. You know what I mean? Like, if you go to Japan, you don't see that as much because they don't want to bring dishonor to their family. I mean, I'm not saying it to be flippant or be a joke.
No,
so it's just a different, it's how
about,
you breed the culture, how you breed society, how you breed the conversation. And in China, it's something that, like, let's face facts. Most Chinese people, based upon what I know about their culture and their current political climate, their lives are shit. So the idea to have inexpensive escape is so pervasive. And
but there's also the
addiction
fact
to that
your culture, right? And addiction it's a huge issue. I mean, and that's not culturally unique. I mean, Jesus Christ, go look at anything with American casinos and you'll understand addiction is not
that's
unique.
why I'm like, this whole thing is not new. Like how why do you act like it's a new thing? But, like, all you gotta do is go somewhere like Butte, Montana, and go into like because I've been there and they have these little slot machines in the bars.
It's oh shit, what is it? There's Crap. It's one of the East Coast cities. That's the big casino one.
Atlantic City.
But yeah, Atlantic City. Okay. I don't gamble. So I'm like, I have an addiction. And that's where like I kind of come back with that beard about all this stuff is like, I know that my personality, this is why I don't play a lot of MMOs, because I know my personality. And I know that like, if I start playing a game that is that immersive, I will lose myself in the game. I mean, my last count of hours spent on Skyrim alone was upwards of 3,000.
Yeah,
you know,
I got 3,600 in Destiny 1.
And like, right. I mean, but then like I go to Destiny 1, and I went into Destiny, you know, and so Skyrim came out, and that was kind of the game that I don't know. I'm not mad at it. But at the same time, that was also the realization when a developer starts sending you free shit because you play their game so much that they're registering that you're playing their game so much, that's usually a good red flag. Like, just FYI. I got so much free shit for Fallout 3 because Bethesda was like, "Oh, here, have these expansions. We really like you. We really enjoy you." And I'm like, okay, maybe I should reevaluate things. But like, so like for Destiny, I think I logged like 700 hours. And, you know, for a lot of people, they're like, what?
Yeah, that seems a bit low for you.
I'm like, but I went into Destiny knowing that about my personality. And so, and I think that's where a lot of my, like, I guess you could call it apathy towards, you know, Eververse in general is like, I joke that Destiny kind of broke me of my completionist OCD because of RNG. Like it just did. Like no, I'm like I remember when they introduced the stupid I call them the iPhones, the consoles or whatever for like the collections.
Oh, the kiosks.
I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna be a terrible thing, but let's go see. And I walked up to the first one for the emblems, and I was like, fuck no. I'm not gonna get that one. I'm done. I'm done. I'm not even gonna try. Like it just
I should hammered log into my account. Like, I should totally log into my PSN account someday and look at my kiosks. They're pretty bad, dude. Because as soon as they got that announced,
like a lot of them were like.
So I started my whole game, like when I would play the game every day, because I played Destiny 1, that was the only game I would play for a long time. And I'd play for a couple hours, and I was streaming too, so that's a whole other ball game. But at the same time, like my game was like, I'd go in for about right after TTK came out, once we got the initial stuff done. My game became build up Glimmer, buy shaders. Build up Glimmer. So basically, what I wanted to do was get all the shaders out of Eva's shop until they were all gone, so I could just check that off in the kiosk, because I didn't ever want to it's the same thing as you can't see my collection behind me, but like I have all these games that I never play, a lot of them,
right? And
they're there if I want to play them,
right?
You know,
and that's what's so funny to me. It's like having, and you know, I kind of having a kid kind of drives that even further home for me. It's like, I could buy all these games, right? But why?
Right.
I'm not going to play them. I mean, I'm not. And it's like, and I think there's also a degree of harsh reality there. Like there's a harsh truth in the reality of that I understand that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge, because that's letting go of that idealistic, you know, I want to have, this is what I enjoy doing, and I want to continue doing this. But you know, and I would gently remind people that that's just, there's a degree of reality that has to be acknowledged. You know, like at the end of the day, you know, at least for me, at the end of the day, you know, the first thing that I worry about is my family. I'm like, and I mean this with as much love to the FFC as I possibly can, but if it was a choice between my family and podcasting, you would not hear from me again.
Right.
Because
my family, any reasonable person would expect that from you, though.
But you would, I mean, and personally, I agree. I personally agree that is a correct priority. However, there are people out there who have different priorities. Now, I would love to chat with them because I want to understand why.
Well, I'll give you a counterexample right now.
That is also a lot of the nurture, right? You know,
Absolutely.
There are people who have different backstories of family than I do.
Well, exactly. Well, some people just simply don't have any left. Like I'm an orphan. Like my parents are gone. My daughter lives across the country. I never see her. I live alone. My streaming family has become my family in many, many ways.
Right.
And
so,
but that's just
your
different.
family is still your priority. Your family's still your
It's
priority.
a different family. Aha! I see what you did there. Different family.
But I mean, but the thing is like at the end of the day, though, the thing that I kind of argue with a lot of people is like you have to know your priorities. Like
yes,
and that's sometimes a really uncomfortable.
You have to know yourself. You have to be honest with yourself.
It's a very uncomfortable process to kind of realize that about yourself, because you might have to acknowledge that, and you might have to accept something that you don't want to. Like there's constant, me personally, I'm a gamer, but there are days where I'm like, I can't play the video game. Like I have too much to do. I have too much. I mean, the house has to be taken care of. My job. I have a job. I have to go to the job. Like I don't want to, but I have to. And
that's like me. That's like me having the internal argument with me about the garbage bags. Though I'm like, I don't want to take the garbage out. Like I got to play.
Yeah,
the game.
right. Yeah,
it's I don't want to take the garbage out.
But I mean, the thing is that argument is going to be inherently going to be the same. It's just a different degree of severity on how you need to do.
It's all about that prism that you look through. It's all everyone's is different, and I think if you go into any conversation about anything with this understanding and this acceptance that the other person is going to have potentially and most likely a different viewpoint, a different place that they're coming from, you have to have that. And without it, we lose all ability to have an actual human conversation, whether it's in person, over the internet, or in typed form or whatever. Right. And I think that as long as we don't collectively remind ourselves of that, we lose. And I think that's where we're at now more than ever. And that's my biggest concern.
And I think that's the thing is like, so for me, for example, I was raised with a very, very kind of classical understanding of like literature. I was raised when I was little, I was basically expected to read at a very early age. And I've always enjoyed reading. Like that's been up until a recent, up until basically the internet, really, I was, on my own. Escapism for me was through books. And so that's where I have a lot of that background to fall back onto with regards to like those quotes and things. When I went to college, I originally was actually going for a triple degree in history, English, and philosophy. And I ended up graduating with a degree in phenomenological psychology and with basically an emphasis in thanatology. And so one of the things that really kind of stood out within that field of study was actually this entire argument. Phenomenological psychology is all about the way that individuals perceive the world. And that is not to say that is how the world is. But at the same time, the argument can be made that for that individual,
their perception is reality. Exactly.
Their perception is reality. And that's really honestly hermeneutic phenomenology is, in a nutshell, is your perception is reality. Now there are aspects of reality that you can't disprove. Like, I mean, one of the common examples that our professors always
flat earthers would definitely argue with you on this.
But I mean, actually, I'm gonna even go even more fun or even more like reductionist to you on that one. It's like, so let's say one of my professors loved doing this example. He's like, say I eat a bad batch of shrooms. This is where this conversation starts. So you get this idea. So say he eats a bad bag of shrooms, a hallucinogenic, right? You hallucinate and you don't perceive that there's a tree in front of you. So you walk forward. You're still going to hit the tree. Right. You're just not going to perceive the tree there. The tree is still there. Reality, regardless still of whether or not your mind is capable. Right. Well, like, now that is to say, though, your reality doesn't have the tree, but it will.
It's still there
because you're going to walk into it.
The force affects you. Well, like I'll give you another version of that too, just because like our life experiences also mold these things, despite the actual. Because there are things that exist that you can perceive. Okay. Now, it's another Bill Cosby reference that has nothing to do with rape. I'm going to take that off the table. No rape here. This is a rape-free reference. But one of his... Right. Right, exactly.
Sorry.
I'm gonna give you these pills. Go. Okay, no. I have a guy that comes in here and he'll feed me stuff to say in Bill Cosby voice because I'm good at it, and it's like it's a safe place because he knows nothing bad will actually come of it. He's like, well, if you say it, it's fine. Anyway, he had a bit. They talked about learning things through experience. Okay, he said, you know, if you try to cross the street, you get hit by a car, you'll be more careful when that car, any other car looking like that, is passing. You'll wait till he passes before crossing the street. And now here's where it gets interesting for me. He says, if you eat some shrimp and later your face blows up, you don't eat those shrimp again. Now, as an adult looking back, I remember what he means is that if you're allergic to shellfish and your face swells as a child, and for like 2 decades, I thought for sure he meant that the shrimp would actually cause your head to explode. And for years, I thought that was the most genius joke. I thought that was the absurdest of it.
But if your head explodes, you're not going to be eating anything.
But that was his point. Like I thought it was a perfect joke. If you eat some shrimp and later your face blows up, you don't eat those shrimp again. Of course you don't. Your face exploded. I thought that was genius. And then later I was like, oh shit, allergies to shellfish is a thing. My life is forever changed. Fuck. Because I had founded so much of my life philosophy, honestly, on the comedy that I listened to as a kid, Bill Cosby being one of them. And that particular joke I thought was so fucking... Like, there was no way to topple that joke. Like, you couldn't push it off a ledge. It was indestructible. It was, like, impenetrable. And fucking...
The logic is amazing.
Because it's like, dude, you can't take that point away from him, and it's hilarious. Perfect. But yet it was not. So that's, like, for me, a perfect example of not only the philosophy of learning from experience, but also the idea of perception... you know, kind of molding your reality.
Well, I mean, like, Bill Cosby. And that's a really good, you know, segue back into the philosophy topic, right? I mean, you have this idea of generationally. And actually, I hesitate to even say it's not a generational thing. It's
cultural.
The way that, yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't even know if it's cultural. Well, it kind of is, but. You know, kind of going back to our original topic about the internet, kind of blending everything together, your cultures are starting to become, for a good, you know, point, they're starting to become more, you can't really tell the difference. You know, they're starting to blur the lines there. But, you know, the idea of there being this abstract truth, you know, it's a damaging understanding when you start realizing that everyone then assumes that they have the abstract truth. And like from a philosophical standpoint, there's this understanding that, you know, yes, and it depends on the philosophy, but like a lot of the philosophies that have the concept of abstract truth, you know, like they'll say, hey, yes, there is an abstract truth, but it's not something that you can understand wholly. Like it's not, because if you in order to understand the entirety of the abstract truth of existence, that, I mean, to be blunt, you'd be God.
Right, it's impossible. And that
and
to
it's
me
not possible for
and
humans.
And that is a pillar of love for me. It's a pillar of my existence that there's no way to understand that, and it's arrogant, in my opinion, to say that.
It's
for me,
right. And the thing, well, and the other thing is that, you know, the argument that phenomenology kind of comes at it from is like there is an abstract truth, but it is so multifaceted that you can't understand it, because the thing is that I only see the world. Like if you take one of the really good examples. So say that you have a piece of a statue, right? A 3D rendition of whatever. Plato uses this with the shadows in the cave, but a lot of different people have used different things. So let's say we have a statue, right? And I'm standing on one side. All I can see is from where I'm standing. Right. I can't see the whole 360-degree view. And a person who is standing on the opposite side is going to have a different perception of that. Same statue, same abstract reality, completely different experience of it.
Right.
And so the point of a phenomenological psychology and really hermeneutic phenomenology in general is that you merge those 2 points of view. And then, and this is where we kind of get focused fire again. This is where we kind of come with this philosophy is then what you do is you also have a person over here. You have a person over here. You have a person over here, over here, over here, over here. You have a person above it. You have a person below it. And you start merging those points of view. And that's where you start getting the holistic point of view.
Exactly.
And that requires the
A
understanding
willingness to
that
engage in that too, though.
Well, right.
Because you can
But it
understand it
also
and still not be
requires at
willing
the
to
start of the conversation that I am only seeing a facet. I am not seeing the whole picture. And if you can come to a conversation with that opinion, now granted, you have to have other people come to the conversation with that same view. But if you can come to that conversation with that opinion, then it opens up it opens up the world. It opens up everything because you apply that to everything you do. And that's where you start getting the ability to empathize with other people. So from a philosophical standpoint, the understanding that you are never going to achieve, this abstract truth or this perfect truth, that's not a defeatist point of view. It's a realistic point of view. But that doesn't mean that you should stop trying. You should never stop searching. You should never stop exploring. You should never stop questioning. Because it's through that exploration, it's through that questioning of reality, through that questioning of the understood, Voltaire's commentary about, who's in power by the people you aren't allowed to question. It's by that you actually get to a better understanding of what the reality is that you exist in. And this isn't just, in video games. So this is again, this is
a perceptive thing for everything.
Right.
And to be perfectly honest with you, I think that lest we get to a place where we're talking in circles, because one, we agree. Two, I think that does apply to everything in such a great way. In as much as you need to come to the table of any discussion, understanding that you have a piece of the puzzle, but you must also be willing to accept those other pieces of the puzzle as equally valid and come together to find what is mutually agreeable, what is not, and then figure out a new reality where everyone can coexist. I mean, that's what the point of philosophy is, I would hope.
And the point there too is using that kind of example is if you've ever done a 5,000 piece puzzle, you will understand that other pieces of the puzzle make no fucking sense. But that doesn't mean that they're not a part of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Because I'm trying to teach my 4-year-old that right now. We got a puzzle for Christmas and he was like, he was looking at it. I'm like, okay, stop. Find me the straight edges. And he's like, but that doesn't, he's like, he's looking at me like, what the shit is this? Like, this color doesn't go with these other colors. And it's like, no, just find me all the straight edge pieces. And then so we finished the puzzle. And I mean, like the click of like all these pieces, it for a 4-year-old. So it's limited. Sure. But I mean, the understanding that it's like, oh,
it's a perspective building exercise.
That's why you were saying don't eat that. It's like yes, we have achieved something on this one. We need that piece. Every piece of the puzzle is necessary, and that's the thing. Kind of going even from philosophy into psychological health. That's why psychological health is really big for me. Is that every piece of the puzzle is needed, and I mean that's my thing. Is like just because you feel that you are not necessary. I got to disagree with you. Everyone is necessary. Mm-hmm. There's a purpose to every piece of the puzzle. And I think it's Janzer is kind of saying the whole instant gratification mentality and behavior of society is just growing. I really actually wanted to talk on that because the thing is like that is a byproduct of the internet age.
Yes, because you can have anything you want anytime you want. For virtually no effort and virtually no cost. And because there's no investment emotionally or financially, there's really no cost to you to engage in that.
Right. Well, and the thing is like, so for me, like, remember, I grew up, basically my main place other than my home was a library. And now this is going to shock some people who have never been in a library without the internet, but we used to have to look up books
on
pieces of paper.
Yep.
and then you had to take that damn piece of paper. Yeah. And then you had to take that damn piece of paper and go find the damn thing by yourself.
Yep.
Like, I mean, a librarian might be there to be like, okay, you're on the wrong floor. There's 5 of them. You're on the 3rd one. You need to be on the 5th one. But I mean, like, and I kind of say that jokingly, but
that was really how it was.
That to me, that sticks out to me as the prime example of the difference between a lot of people, you know, because like today's world, I have Google. I have scholar.google. You know, if I needed a scholarly page.
Other side of that, though.
Right.
It's one thing to have the information available. It taught me how to research. It's one thing to have the information available. It's another thing to not fucking bother. And you know,
well, yeah.
You know, as someone who also does technical support, like for a living.
Yeah. What's my password?
Oh, sure. The other. Okay, I'm not going down that road. But here's the thing, like, you know, I had this talk with Ben Bowman, you know, and who understood it immediately, and I love him and bless him for that. But they brought the question to me, which is very, very good, about the S4 Creator Initiative. And he said, why do we need this? I'm like, okay, so you're saying with the existence of YouTube and Google and all these free informational outlets, you're asking why this business needs to exist. I'm like, well, those things exist. Do you not get these fucking questions 6 times in an hour, every hour of every day that you're live streaming? Well, yeah, we do. Why do you think that is? Because they didn't do their research, they don't want to do their research, or they've done the research and they don't understand it and they need help. And, you know, that to me kind of brings this whole thing together, where it's like information is going to come at you in different ways. You're going to see it differently than the next guy. And maybe just your ability to, you know, consume it alone is valuable. And that goes back to every puzzle piece is valid. Because someone comes to me with a question about OBS that I know how to solve, it doesn't make them stupid. It just makes me more skilled in that area. It's no different if we're talking about politics or philosophy or religion or video games or cherry phosphates, to throw a random Garfield reference at you. You know, all these things are valid and all the information is there, but we need each other to thrive. And if there is a really, for me, an overarching lesson about the human condition such as it is, it's that we need each other, whether we like it or not, but we need each other.
Actually, I would argue it's even more important when we don't like each other, that we need each other. I've
watched Enemy Mine.
Yeah. It's the people who push you out of your comfort zone, both in a good and a bad way. You know, there is a good and a bad way to get pushed out of the comfort zone. I mean, obviously you want more of the good, but sometimes you have to be shoved out of the comfort zone. Yeah. I mean, that's how birds learn to fly, guys. I mean, harsh reality there.
Mom.
A lot of yeah. Go watch an eagle learn how to fly. It's not either comforting at all.
It's so pretty, or
it's either you're an endangered species. Don't do that.
No.
But I mean, and that's the thing is, like, that's part of nature, right? That's you, and that goes back into the understanding that no one has all the answers. And that's a core philosophical truth. And that is, to me, one of the biggest things that you have to approach everything in life about. I'm not going to be the smartest person in the room ever. But the thing is, at the end of the day,
I mean, you can rig that.
Neither is the smart. Yeah, I mean, you can, and I have a huge issue with people who do rig it, because I think that they're being untruthful about reality.
Easy.
It is.
Just walk into a fucking kindergarten classroom. You're going to feel like amazing.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you'll find a very harsh truth. You'll find a harsh truth really quick, that just because you're the smartest guy in the room, no one's interested in what you have to say about higher thinking, because they're too busy eating the Play-Doh. You know?
Right. But the Play-Doh tastes good.
That's their reality in that moment.
We're getting my son ready for kindergarten, and I was looking at some of the stuff, and I'm like, they're expecting him to do what? I'm like, dude,
yeah.
I remember, like, I don't remember a lot of kindergarten, but I remember, like, at the end of kindergarten, I was good to know that that color was blue. Like, like the expectation was I knew my fucking colors and I knew basic shapes. And I sometimes took a nap, which I regret that I did not take more advantage of at that time. But, like, it's like, the expectation is like, I'm like, what the hell? They're expecting him to do all this stuff. And so, yeah, and again, it's just the expectation too. And that kind of goes back to the instant gratification piece. It's that expectation, that world that you're raised in that really, really creates that paradigm or that worldview that you take with you in everything that you do. And so, again, going back to like the library example, right? I go into a library today and it's like there's computer banks everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's maybe some books. And I'm like, what? Like, why is it? And it's like, I'll talk to people who are in college and they're research and they're like, well, I could just Google it. And it's like, yeah, but
it's not the same.
As annoying as it sounds, and it was annoying. I mean, it was annoying having to page through an encyclopedia and understand how encyclopedias in general worked. Like,
right,
most useless knowledge ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way they have Britannica organization is bizarre.
My parents had a world book, and
the world books,
yeah.
Oh.
But here's the thing: like when my mother died, like that was one of the things that I wanted. I got exactly. I wanted those because, and I have the Destiny hardcover strategy guides for the same purpose, because this is an inexorable snapshot of the reality of knowledge for that subject at that time.
At that time.
Exactly.
And that's the other thing that a lot of people are like, well, but that's not accurate. That's not correct information. I'm like, no.
It was then.
There's a really cool ability to say, look at the transformation of information, right? It's like flat earthers, we started with the understanding that the earth was flat, right? And we kind of realized after someone tried to sail off the edge and they didn't fall off that it's not. And, I'm sorry, but it's not. It's the same concept as like the earth is not the center of the solar system. Right. We started with, and again, it's a very natural human thing. You think you're the center of everything because it's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing if you're awoken to the fact that you're not, and then you refuse to acknowledge that. That's a bad thing.
Catch me outside. How about that? That kind of shit.
Right. But I mean, like, so, for instance, my son, 4-year-old, who has started to understand, like he has recently, anytime someone gets hurt, he immediately wants to make sure that they are okay and that they know that he's there to help them. And, and it doesn't matter who. It's like, we'll be walking into a store and, a kid trips and he's like the first person running over there. I'm like, okay, let the mom take care of the kid.
Right.
But like up until basically like 6 months ago, he didn't have that. He didn't have that capability. Like he was like, oh, you fell. That's tough shit. Like, yeah, whatever. I'm not hurt. But if he got hurt, it was like, you could tell it was mystifying to him why other people didn't respond to that. Right. And you see that in development psychology as well. You have a lot of times when a kid is like 2 or 3, it's the classical, like they'll stand in front of the TV right in front of everybody. And everyone else can't see anything because, the kid's standing right there. And it's like one of the most things that like most people get annoyed. But for the child, what their worldview is like, I can see perfectly, so everyone else can. Because everyone perceives reality the same way I
do. Right.
And so, and it's the real, and it's a growth. It's a natural progression of the mental capabilities of a human to kind of realize at a certain point that is not the case.
Then you go on Reddit.
Oh yeah, right. But that's my point. Is like, if you've never been forced to realize that emotionally, like you can understand that physically. I get, like, there's a vast difference between understanding reality physically and understanding reality from a psychological or emotional point of view. But if you've never been basically taught that there is an emotional difference, then the whole argument about how vitriol or how venomous some people get about arguments makes perfect sense.
Right.
Because to their worldview, it is alien and foreign and quite frankly fucking terrifying that someone doesn't feel the exact same way that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you start getting that generation. And again, I hesitate to call it generational because I mean I've seen people who,
right,
I've been in conversations with Holocaust deniers, right? And it's
Whoa.
like the most bizarre conversation I have ever had is with someone who refuses to acknowledge that the Holocaust happened. I mean, it's just the lengths to which they go to convince themselves that it never happened is just it's bizarre.
Yeah, I always liken it. I feel like if you could make a physical representation, like a visual representation of that argument, it's like the kid who's trying to be fed something they don't want to be fed, and they're pushing back as far as they can. They're closing. No, I don't want. And that's really what it boils down to. I mean, but I think for me, it all comes back to that. If we're trying to make an ultimate point, is that we understand it. We hope that those listening understand that you got to know you're a piece of the puzzle. You've got to understand the other pieces are going to look at things differently, and they all need to be given equal respect and weight to be able to come to a more overarching understanding that benefits everybody. And the sooner we get to that place, the better off we're going to be as a society, because those halcyon days before the internet are never going to be again. We didn't know how good we had it.
To a degree, I don't necessarily want them. I mean, I think
I don't either.
Is an amazing tool, as dark as it can get. I think that the blending of cultures and knowledge bases, I view things as database, stuff.
Sure.
I mean, the blending of that database, that communal database, I think is an amazing. I've been open to perspectives that I didn't even know existed, and I mean, and some of them I kind of roll my eyes at, and I'm like, that's kind of cute, and some of them are just groundbreaking, like the perspectives that I've been introduced to, but every one of them has I really think that everyone has a kernel, and it's not always the same size kernel. I mean, there's some people out there who are legitimately crazy, but there is a point to one of those, to every single person. And I think that, the people who are going to challenge you personally, or, your views, I think those are actually the more important people, because they force you to reevaluate your truth. And part of that reevaluation might be acknowledging that your truth is not the truth. And that's where the discomfort of growing comes from. It's not
to be honest, I cannot imagine a better place to end the discussion for now. We could go on about this for like 12 15 hours, because you deal with your basic human psychology, developmental psychology. My degree is in organizational psychology, so I look at how groups of people move together and stuff. Right, because that's a whole other fucking. I think folks, we're gonna have Blue back to talk about sociology over philosophy next time.
Sociology, yeah. Milgram, let's go.
All right, that's right.
Zimbardo,
right. So, at the risk of begging you to self promote, where can people find you and what you do?
Most of us, or most of my stuff is going to be with the Focus Fire group. I've had to basically step back. I used to try to be involved with like a lot of different I do most of my involvement with Discord, just because it's on my phone. It's really easy for us to move around. So there was a time where I was in like, I think close to 100 different servers, and it just got way too overwhelming. And I felt really bad, but I had to leave a majority of them because I'm like, I can't, there's too many directions that I'm getting, information poured at me. So we mostly are in the Focus Fire chat Discord. It's just Discord. I think the easy link is discord.me/FFC. If it's easier, we're also on Twitter @Focus Fire Chat. Honestly, that's where I would recommend going. My personal Twitter, which is where, Jim was mentioning at the top of the show, I do all the daily quotes and stuff. We do a daily quote on the Focus Fire chat, but it's going to be specifically about Destiny, that topic of the week that we do. My personal Twitter, nearly said personal Discord. That would be even more terrifying. My personal, that would be a very scary place. I would not recommend anyone going to it. My personal Twitter is Blue Crew _86, because yes, someone actually does have the name Blue Crew 86 and has not been active on Twitter for 5 years, and I might be a little bit jealous, but
just a little.
Just a little. I might have actually tweeted him about 5 times asking him if he's alive, and he hasn't responded. So I'm really concerned. But yeah, so that's where on Twitter, and then Twitch, we do weekly streams of game streams during the week, and then every Friday night at about 10 p.m. Central, we'll actually do a recap of the week-long conversations that we have. And the cool thing with Focus Fire that we kind of do a little bit different than a lot of the lore creators out there that I'm aware of. And if you are a lore creator and you do this, and I just stepped on your toes, I don't mean that offensively. I just don't know everything, as the past couple hours have probably. Anyways, the cool thing that Focus Fire does is that every weekend we basically set up a poll and we just open it up to everybody. And we're like, hey, what do you want to talk about for the next week? And then basically based on that poll, that's what we talk about for the next week. And so we have like weeks. I mean, we just got done rehashing out the Books of Sorrow.
There you go.
Which is from Destiny 1. Like, I mean, we're in the middle of Destiny 2, guys. Like,
people got stuff they want to talk about. And some people weren't there for it. And it's something where it's kind of like you go to see a rock band play. Sometimes you want to hear the old songs again, and and songs evolve over time. So maybe the way you guys are talking about it now is different from the first time you did it. It's totally valid. It's totally valid.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's 100% correct. Yeah. So, but I mean, that's one of the big things that we kind of offer is if there is a particular subject that you're interested in, just let us know. We'll put it on a poll. And if you can, we have people who like actively campaign in chat during the weekends, or like, no, vote for this. Like, that's and awesome. It's like, I think it's hilarious. I'm like, do it. Like, just knock yourselves out. If you get enough votes, we'll totally talk about that for the week. And we've had, I think right now we're talking about ghost shells is what we're talking about right now.
Nice.
So
I tell you, Blue, this is a very, very fascinating conversation, and I cannot wait to have another one with you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for having us. Or me, actually. I'm so used to talking.
Next week, multiple personalities.
Multiple personalities, dissociative identity disorder. We'll have Red Ego 95.
Exactly. That's what's in Grind's many heads this week. Oh, we will see you next week. Take care.